full frame mirrorless camera. Are you ready for one yet? Well, if you're not, maybe you will be soon. And in this video, I'm going to talk about the Canon EOS R compared to the Nikon Z6. And I'm going to talk about some things that are similar. I'm going to talk about some things that I like and I don't like, and a couple of really, really big differences between these two cameras. Stick around. So I've been shooting with my Canon EOS R for about 10 months now, and I really love it. And the reason I got a Canon was because I'm a Canon shooter. I've had 20 years plus history shooting Canon. I have lenses, I have gear, so the transition for me was seamless. But someone might be at a point where they're looking to get into mirrorless and maybe don't have a huge system built up, and they can kind of go wherever they want. Nikon, Sony, Olympus, whatever they want to get into. So I want to take two cameras. I want to take this, and I want to take the Z6, which we've used, not extensively, but we've tried it out. We really like it, and I want to compare it to how it compares to the Canon EOS R. And so let's take a look. Now, price-wise, they're both very similar at about $1,800 for the body only. So there's really no difference there. It's an investment. It's an expensive camera, but it's not, a $3,000, top-of-the-line camera. So if you're looking to get into full-frame mirrorless, and you can dedicate some budget to this, these are really great option cameras like this. So they're both, Nikon is 25 or so megapixels, Canon is 30, so there's really no difference there. They both have the same shooting modes. They both shoot RAW and JPEG. As far as the image quality with high ISO, I've gotten great results at high ISOs with the Canon R. We've tried out the Nikon Z6 with some high ISO shots and gotten some really great results there also. So comparably, they're both very good at high ISO. They both shoot 4K video. They both have eye detect autofocus. The metering ranges are very similar. Canon, you can get it up to, I think, about 8 frames per second shooting in burst mode. With the Nikon Z6, it's closer to 12. Really not a huge difference. If you need 20 or 30 frames per second, it's a specialized field. You're going to need a special kind of camera for that. For the kind of shooting that most people are doing, 8 frames per second, 12 frames per second is enough. And there's really not much of a difference between the two. The size of these cameras are very similar. The Nikon is actually a little bit smaller. The Canon EOS R feels like, to me, like a small DSLR would feel. So it's not a huge difference from the 5D4 that I was using, but it's noticeably smaller in my hand. The Z6 is only a little bit smaller than the EOS R, but it actually does feel a lot smaller in your hand. And it's a little bit lighter also. It's probably about 1/4 pound lighter than the Canon R. So the size-wise, it's a little bit smaller. I would definitely, before doing anything, always hold these cameras in your hand before you go into any kind of purchase whatsoever, because how the camera feels in your hand really makes a huge difference to how it's going to feel carrying it around all day, and the ergonomics and where the buttons are and everything. So you definitely want to hold it, feel it, hold it in your hand anyway, feel how it balances with the lenses and things like that. But size-wise, the Z6 is a little bit smaller. The rear LCD screens on these are basically about the same size, just over 3 inches. So really not a huge difference there. Both have one memory card slot, which is one of those things that I don't like. I'm used to shooting with the 5D4 that has 2 slots. A lot of other cameras, pro level cameras, have 2 card slots for backups and things like that. Both just have one. The Canon EOS R has a slot for SD cards, which I have SD cards. Everybody probably has 20 SD cards that they've built up over the years. The Nikon Z6 uses the new XQD card, which you probably don't have one, so you're going to have to go out and buy one. And they tend to be more expensive than the comparable CF cards or SD cards. So there's a little drawback to the Z6 there, is that you're going to have to basically go buy a memory card that you don't already have. So across the board so far, very comparable. Image quality on both of these cameras is really great. A couple of small differences along the way, but nothing really big. But there's 2 really big, huge differences between these 2 cameras that I want to talk about now. One thing that I love about the Canon and one thing I love about the Nikon. The first thing is the LCD screen. Now, I mentioned that the LCD screens, the rear screens on both these cameras, are very similar in size. And while that's true, the Canon rear LCD screen is fully articulating. It comes out this way, it turns around this way, I can hold it. It's basically full 360 view, any configuration that you want. The Nikon, on the Nikon Z6, the rear LCD screen basically just kind of tilts out like this. You can turn it so it's facing straight up, but that's really about it. It doesn't tilt to the side. It doesn't have this one contact point where you can basically move it around in any direction. And for a lot of purposes, that's really very limiting. Not only for vlogging, but for, you know, just creative photography purposes. I found this articulating LCD screen to be hugely helpful in a lot of situations where I can't necessarily compose the image the way I normally would, and I'm holding a camera in a weird angle, you know, through a fence or over something or underneath something, where I'm trying to get a shot where if I can pull the screen out and turn it in a certain way, I can see this thing wherever the camera is. So it's a great compositional tool to have a fully articulated screen in the back like this. So it's a big plus on the Canon EOS R and a negative on the Z6 side. But one other huge difference, and now this is a plus on the Nikon Z6 side, is in-body image stabilization. Now both have it for video. It works pretty good for video. The in-body image stabilization works pretty well for video. But for still photography, for shooting, the Canon doesn't have it. The Canon, we're still relying on the image stabilization in the lenses, which is great, but to be able to have it in body, we've tried the Z6, we've used the in-body image stabilization just casually, not even really trying that hard, casually getting shots at 1 second. A 1 second exposure is hugely long in photography. Getting a 1 second exposure that's perfectly clear and crisp and not blurred whatsoever really makes a big difference. And, you know, in certain situations, and I was just casually kind of hand-holding it and shooting it, bracing yourself and actually being able to extend it beyond 1 second, it makes a huge difference to not have to set up a tripod or find a place to prop your camera every time you want to take an exposure more than, you know, a half a second or so. So a huge plus on the Nikon Z6 side for the in-body image stabilization. So if you're in the market for a full-frame mirrorless camera, and believe me, you really probably should be at this point, both these cameras are really great. Just a quick recap though, most features very much the same. A small plus on the Canon side is that it takes SD memory cards, which you probably already have, and you won't have to buy a new XQD card, which is what the Z6 uses. A small plus on the Z6 side is the smaller size, smaller and lighter body size, which is great as these cameras get smaller. A huge plus on the Canon side is the articulating rear LCD screen, and a huge plus on the Z6 side is the in-body image stabilization. But if you've used either of these cameras or both of these cameras and you have any comments, anything you want to add about things that you like or you don't like about either one of them, put them in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you. So I hope you found this helpful. I'm going to put a video here about reasons to not switch to mirrorless yet, and a video here about reasons that you maybe should switch to mirrorless. So you can check those out. If you're at a turning point and you really need to make a decision, I think those will be really helpful. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.